Hey guys, how's it going? So we got our semester 2 quiz 2 practice to complete here. So remember the quiz on Friday will be almost exactly like this. So let's get moving. So first of all, just a reminder, I had forgotten to delete this by completing the square as part of the instructions. You may use any of the methods that we've learned so far. So we learned completing the square, we learned solve by factoring, or that zero product property, and we've also learned using the quadratic formula. So the last video was all about completing the square. So if you'd like to complete the square still, that makes sense to you, go for it. I want to remind you of the other two ways here. So here I want to go back to that very first way that we did, which is solve by factoring. I think that's the easiest way to solve equations when the problem is factorable. So for this particular question, to solve this one by using factoring, we would say, hey, it's already equal to 0, so we need to factor this. Factoring requires figuring out which numbers multiply to 5, and that turns out that's going to be 1 times 5. And then it does need to be negative 5. So one of these must be a negative number, and they have to add to positive 4. So in this case, we put a negative on that 1 there, and we end up having n minus 1 multiplied by n plus 5 is equal to 0. And using our zero product property, we may now write that n minus 1 equals 0 and n plus 5 equals 0. Adding 1 to both sides, we get n is equal to 1. And we also subtract 5 on both sides. We get n is equal to negative 5. And that's pretty much it. That's the entire question. So I do think it's a lot easier to do it that way than the whole, completing the square process. But you're still allowed to complete the square if you want to. It's up to you. You pick your favorite method. We're going to be completing the square later anyways for the graphing part of the question. So here, for these questions, we got to take that negative a squared. I'm going to move it all the way to the left because I'm going to solve this one using the quadratic formula. So I'm going to go a squared, and I'm going to put this in the quote-unquote correct order, plus a minus 20 is equal to 0. So again, all I did was I moved that to the other side, rearranged the ordering. Then I went ahead and we're going to go ahead and say letter A is equal to 1. Letter B is also equal to 1, and letter C is equal to negative 20. We are using our quadratic formula that negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I highly recommend putting the entire thing into the calculator just to make your life a little bit easier. I will be showing you how to plug that into your calculator every step of the way if you would like to. But first, we need to actually fill it in. So that formula is going to be x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared. So we're replacing this b here, filling it in, that 1. We're taking that b there, which is the 1, filling it in, minus 4 times 1 times, and this letter c here is negative 20, all divided by 2 times 1. And you just plug, again, that entire thing into the calculator, just like we practiced last week. If you plug the entire thing in, we'll have alpha y equals enter, and that gives us that fraction bar. And we're going to go negative 1 plus, only the plus version first. And then we're just plugging in exactly as we wrote it down, minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times 1. And that's going to give us x is equal to 4. And if we go back, highlight it, replace this over here with a negative, you'll get negative 5 as our two answers. And that's pretty much it. We have our two solutions all done. So this one also is factorable, by the way. If you wanted to actually do it the same exact way, figure out that I'm multiply to negative 20 and add to positive 1, that might have been faster for you. But I wanted to show you can use whatever method you feel like. So number 3 is actually a review problem. So it's a review problem that I wanted to put back on because I feel like we really need to practice this as a class. So this factor by grouping, the method that we've taught before is we're going to multiply the edges together. That's going to be 7 multiplied by 12. Then that is 84. We now need to figure out all of the numbers that multiply to 84. We're going to go ahead and do this using a calculator. So the 1 after 1 is 2. Using your calculator, 84 divided by 2 is 42. 84 divided by 3. Does that work out? I believe it does. That's going to be 28. If you do it with 4, that will also work out. If you do it with 4, it will be 21. 5 will not work. 6 does work. That's going to be 6 times 14. 7, that works. That's going to be 7 times 12. 8 will not work. 9 will not work. 10 will not work. 11 will not work. 12 goes back to where we already were. So these are all the possibilities. These are both positive. So all these are positive. We're trying to figure out which one of these adds to 20. That's going to be this guy right here. This guy adds to 20 because this one adds like 25. You know, these ones don't add up correctly. And this is what we're going to use to split the question up. So splitting this question up, we're going to have 7p squared, and that 20 is going to become plus 6p plus 14p plus 12. We divide the problem down the center, and we factor these two guys separately. So we take a p away, and that's going to be 7p plus 6. We take a 2 away. That's going to be 7p plus 6. If you need help with this step going from here to here, I highly recommend coming in to ask me. We can do quite a few practices. You're asking yourself the question, what can be pulled out of both? There's a p in both of these, and in both of these you can divide them both by 2, so there's a 2 there. Now the 7p plus 6 is identical, and what's left over is p plus 2. The p goes there, the 2 goes there, and that is the entire question. Let's continue on to that next page. We're going to go ahead and do problem number 4 here, which says sketch each graph of the function. Now this one is where I meant to put that completing the square instruction. I do need you to complete the square on these. That was what we had learned, and we have not practiced it on the graphing. So sketch each graph of the function, and specifically we have to complete the square when we do this. So we're completing the square when we do this. In order for that to happen, first things first is to put it inside of parentheses. So x squared plus 6x, and the parentheses, and plus 5 on the outside. We take that number 6 that we've been using off to the side, divide by 2, put a star and square it. That gives us the 9. We have to add 9 here. However, we're not actually adding 9 only to one side. We must add it to the other, but you can't mess with it over here. So you subtract 9. You rewrite it using that starred value, x plus 3 squared minus 4. And it turns out this is exactly the same function as a test question that we had last week. So x plus 3 squared minus 4. So we learned that we're going to go ahead and graph that guy at -3, -4. That is our very first coordinates. And then after that, you must get the remaining coordinates using your calculator. You can just plug in -2 if you want, like we're making that x there a -2. Just to show you that you could do this by hand. This is what you could do. You could also just use a calculator to get all the coordinates. So -2 plus 3 squared minus 4, making that x a -2. And that's going to give you 1 squared minus 4, and that'll be 1 minus 4. That's going to give you a -3. So that's going to be at -2 comma -3. It'd be about right there. Using that axis of symmetry idea, you're dividing straight down the center. You'd also get over here. There are other methods we could use up to on our calculator to get it, but regardless of which method you choose, you'll end up with these other coordinates up here as well. And the graph will end up looking like a happy face over here. This probably should be smooth. Same exact idea for all these questions. We gotta do the same thing, but we're gonna have to use those parentheses and do our best to rewrite it. So our first step here is to rewrite. So we have f of x, and we need to write it with parentheses, 2x squared minus 12x plus 15. Unfortunately, to complete the square, we're going to have to divide these guys by 2. So we're going to start by factoring out a 2. The 15 stays kind of by itself off to the side. After that, we need to do the same exact work we've been doing. That -6 off to the side, divide it by 2, put a star, and square it. So we're adding 9 here. But you do need to be careful. This number out here is not adding 9. The reason why is you didn't actually add 9. You added 2 multiplied by 9, which is 18. So you have to subtract 18 over here on the outside. Equals 2, and we got x minus 3 squared, and 15 minus 18, that's also minus 3. So there's our function, which means our beginning coordinate is at 3 comma -3. Remember, it's always at opposite signs. So like on this question, we started at -3 because it was positive. This one, it was -3. So now it's positive over here. So we're going to start at 3 comma -3 over down below. Then yet again, we need to figure out a way on our calculator to do it. I didn't use the calculator last time. I kind of just plugged it in, and that was already a test question, so we already knew the answers. This one, I'm going to remind you of those buttons on the calculator to hit. So you're going to hit y equals up here in the top left-hand corner. Then we need to graph it just as it appears, and we're going to do the one that we fixed up down here at the bottom. So that is going to be 2 parentheses x minus 3 squared minus 3. Technically, by the way, you could have used the original one up here to get all the coordinates. I still require you to get to that boxed answer there, that complete the square, to get full credit. If you hit graph, you can get yourself a graph of it. So it kind of looks like that. We already know where it starts. But to get the precise coordinates, you're going to hit second graph, that table of values, so you can figure out exactly where we are. So there's our 3 comma -3. Other coordinates, we got 2 comma -1. So 2 comma -1. And then we have 4 comma -1. We got 5 comma 5. And we also have 0 comma 5. Or is it 0 comma 5 or 1 comma 5? 1 comma 5. That makes more sense. So it's nice and symmetrical. And here again, make sure you curve your graph. You got to make sure that you don't draw straight lines. It is a curvy situation. All of the parabolas are curvy lines. There are no straight lines here. It's all nice and curvy. So do your best to make it curvy and symmetrical along that axis of symmetry, that line that goes directly down that center, that axis symmetry. So number 6, here we go, our very last question for this quiz review. We can rewrite it again with those parentheses first. After that, we have to go ahead and make sure that's a 1 in front. So we need to factor out a negative sign. Continuing on, negative. And we need to do our completing the square off to the side of the question. So completing the square off to the side, you're going to have that -8 dividing by 2, putting a star and squaring it. So we're going to add 16 here, but you can't just add 16 here. You have to add 16 to the other side, but there's actually a negative here. So you actually subtracted 16, which means we have to add 16 here. Rewrite it. X minus 4 quantity squared minus 1. Here's our graph. We're starting at 4 comma -1. So again, copy this same coordinate there. We got 4 comma -1. There's our very first coordinate. For the remaining coordinates, you can use your calculator. You can do kind of whatever you want to do to figure out these remaining coordinates. I'm just going to go ahead and fill them in. There's not really that much to it. There's also a little trick I can teach you if you want. If you're interested in it, you might have been able to count how I did mine there. But there is a cute little trick you can do for quadratics, and I'd love to go over it with you if you want to come talk about it after class. Just let me know. But other than that, good luck on this quiz, and have a great rest of your day.